I really didn't know very much. Grandma and Grandpa and my elders, they never talked about that. You know, I think they probably tried to block it out of their mind. Only thing my great-great-grandmother said was her grandma was 14 years old when she came on the Trail of Tears.
It just was never spoken about.
It was just repressed and not many stories were passed down. And I had family come from Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina.
Everybody's got different stories because they remember different parts of stuff.
They were both so excited that I was going to do that trip, and they were so excited to find out, you know, what I learned. You know, that's what they wanted to know was, you know, when you get back, you're really going to have some stories to tell.
My art teacher came up to me and said, you need to look into this. And he said, they're picking some kids to retrace the Trail of Tears. And so I applied for it, told them that I was an artist, and I wanted to put the feeling, what they went through, their tragedy and stuff, in my artwork. Instead of reading about it, I wanted them to look in a picture and see it.
You know, just like most teenagers, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life and trying to get through high school. And I applied, and besides it was going to be a bike ride, I didn't know much more than that. It sounded like a challenge I would want to take on, yeah.
These are my original gloves. And that's why they look so terrible. Because I wore them every day for years and years. No, they still fit. After all these years. I was 16, and me and Marvin were the two youngest on the ride, I believe. I had been in the Cherokee Nation Youth Leadership Program. We actually graduated just a few days before we left out for the bike trip. So I had really changed that year because I'd been really shy most of my life. And that program really helped me get some confidence.
It was a youth leadership program, they said, and that they wanted about 20 youth from throughout the area to come in and be a part of this. I figured it'd be hundreds of people who apply, and I didn't know what my chances would be, but I went ahead and wrote my essay and about why I would want to do it and what I thought I would get out of it. And in fact, I didn't know much about what had happened on the Trail of Tears. I added that, you know, so I wanted to learn more about that history. So I just put everything I could into my essay about why I wanted to do it.
I have my original helmet. In 1984, I was 18 years old. Dr. Mike Morris and Mose Killer were the coordinators at this point, and they are the ones that were the original grandfathers, if you will, of the Remember the Removal bike ride.
Once I got in the youth leadership program, they took us out to Red Clay. That was one of our trips. What Mike and Mose noticed was on the way out there wasn't a single marker for the Trail of Tears. So that got Mike and Mose to thinking, what can we do to incorporate our youth and then also bring attention to the Trail of Tears?
I'm nervous. Mike Morris and Mose Killer visited my parents often to consult with them about this dream, this amazing dream that had never happened before. It was not only a trip to help you learn your culture, that was right at the heart of it. You know, it was for the riders to understand where our ancestors came from and to be there. But it was also a trip to help you gain leadership, help you to know how to have teamwork with one another.
Because it was new, nobody's done it before.
We were young and dumb enough not to be too scared. We still thought we were invincible.
Yeah, there was 16 that actually rode the ride. I was 18, the oldest was 21, and the youngest was 15.
Probably 90% of us hadn't been that far away from home. And back then it was the first ride, of course, and so in reality we only had about 3 training rides before we left.
Whenever we were training around here, we rode several places, you know, that had big hills and stuff, you know, but not like the mountains we were going to experience.
And so it was up to us to train on our own. We left out on May 28th and we went in vans and buses. Took us 2 or 3 days to get there.
So when we got out to North Carolina, we camped out there for a week and we trained out there also, but that still was not enough. So that first day was...
Our first day was murderous. We lost so many riders either from injury or dehydration.
I can remember pedaling just as hard as I could trying to get up these mountains, and I got to thinking, I'm not going to make this.
I mean, we were coming out of the mountains into Tennessee. We just did the best we could. My group, there were 4 in my group, we stayed together all day, but we hadn't really considered the logistics of having water stops and things like that, so we had 2 water bottles for the entire day.
Ours were steel frame bikes. They were Sinelli Centurions.
We had to carry 75 pounds of extra weight on our bikes. I had my clean clothes on the front forks, my dirty clothes in the back 4 bags, and we carried our tent, we carried our sleeping bag, we carried our water and our food.
We're the only group that's camped out every night. On the way home, the only night we stayed in air conditioning was when we got to the University of Arkansas.
It was a low budget deal. I lost 30 pounds during that month we were gone.
I weighed 230 pounds whenever I left, and I weighed 185 pounds when I got back.
Mike Morris realized we weren't getting enough food calories. He started advocating for us to get more money to buy more food, because we would have breakfast, a small breakfast in the mornings, and then have sandwiches or something on the side of the road for lunch, and then evening we had a cook with us. She was traveling in an old school bus with cooking equipment, and she would cook an evening meal for us. But even then, we got 1 serving apiece, I think, and that was it. And we were pretty hungry. We didn't complain. We just dealt with it. We thought it was just part of the experience, you know.
Gatorade found out about it, and they sponsored us, and we had Gatorade to drink all the way back.
And we were able to carry 2, and the one closest to the highway would always be the hottest. So there's nothing like a good hot drink of Gatorade when it's 110 outside.
Granola found out about us, and they gave us granola bars all the way back.
Boxes and boxes and boxes. I mean, you cannot imagine how many boxes of granola and Gatorade was cases in the back of that bus. For years, I would not eat granola or Gatorade. I would not let it come in my house because that's all we had every day.
Every now and then they would say, hey, can you call your parents and tell them to wire money to, you know, this place here, and we'll pick it up. We remember doing that every now and then when we ran out of money and we didn't have nothing to eat. So we would get money that way. I think we went out and ate one time, and it was Chinese food.
In every town we were in, newspaper, radio, television, whatever, we did lots of interviews. So, you know, as we got closer to home, more and more people would be waiting for us to ride through. It was really neat because it was like a parade every day. Every town we went through, it was just lines of people waving at us. And of course, we've been on the road probably a couple weeks by then, maybe. And this lady comes out of the convenience store. She's in her 60s, and she's waving us down. Are y'all the Indians? And of course, we all looked at each other like, yeah, that would be us.
We had no GPS, no phones.
Most people don't know on that first route we used 2 routes. We got to Jackson, Missouri, and went south into Arkansas, and turned west at Batesville, Arkansas, and came through the Ozarks, through Mountain Home, Mountain View, and that area, and came into Fayetteville that way. That is the Binge route that was used by John Binge. So we used the northern route and the Binge route in '84.
We entered the trail the second week that they had started out, the riders, and had ridden for 2 weeks. And then we came along and joined them, I think it was in Kentucky.
they had a map that we were following, and they say, I think they went this way. So we'd go that way, or we would get to a town and would ask people about it, and if the historians knew anything about it, they said, oh yeah, they went this way, they took this route, so we would follow that route. Sometimes we would walk through gravel roads and push our bikes, or go cut through a field, or go through people's backyards, follow it as close as we could, and we would end up finding burial graves, and people would tell us the history about them and what they found on their land. And none of us ever got lost, really. We'd choose this or that road. We was always on the right road. You know, none of us we never had to go look for anybody.
I've gone back there since the ride just twice, and every time when I hit that boundary of Cherokee, North Carolina, it's such a strong emotional feeling. It's like I'm finally home. Me and my friends from Stillwell, we kind of walked off from everybody and went nature trail walking. And we found some ruts. There was a hillside, and there was a spring right there on the side of the hillside. And right between the spring and the hillside, there was 2 ruts about a foot deep, and just 2 lines. The person that worked there, they asked us, do you know what that is? And we said no. And he said, those are wagon tracks. He said, those have been there since the Trail of Tears.
You know, in my mind's eye, I suppose, I could look and some of the ancestors were there with us.
You would think we would have just been drained and ready to pass out. I mean, that would make sense, right? After burning millions of calories, and then after we would eat and clean up, we would play softball or basketball or frisbee for hours. We were just excited to not be on the bike and get to, you know, interact with each other, because we were in 4 separate groups too. I was in the slow group. Everybody about my height was in the slow group because we just don't have as much legs as everybody else. But the other 3 groups, we didn't see them all day. Like unless we were there at lunchtime and they were still eating lunch. I mean, that was about the only time we ever saw them. So it was exciting after dinner because we got to be with each other.
All of us stuck together.
Mike and Mose were always just so inspirational and motivational, and they wanted it to mean something to these riders for the rest of their lives. So there was lots of teamwork involved, there was lots of motivational speaking. Every moment of the trip was trying to build them up so that they knew that they could actually accomplish anything.
Mike and Mose had always talked about experiential education. Once you experience it, you'll never forget it.
Mose Killer was funny, and he cared about people. He wanted us to succeed. There was nothing he wanted more, and that was why he did what he did.
Mike, he really thought this would work. He was so confident in his belief that we believed it too. And we didn't want to give up a lot of times just for him, because he believed in us so much.
It's almost visceral when you're around each other because you just have such a love. Even the other riders have talked about that in other years. When you go through something that pushes you past what you think is your limit, that's what it is when you all realize, oh, we can do this.
If somebody was having a hard time, we didn't give them a hand out, we gave them a hand up saying, come on, let's go. You know, I got you, I got you.
I remember my friend Jeff. Jeff passed a few years ago, Jeff Robinson. He was in our group, and I knew we were pretty close to the end of the day. We still wasn't sure how much farther we had to go, and I had probably 1 gulp of water in my last bottle, and I gave it to him. And just thinking back on it, we all sit around the campfire. A lot of nights we would just sit around the campfire and discuss the day and talk about things we could do better or what happened during the day. And Jeff got up. He wanted to speak, and he said, I just want to thank Will for giving me his last drink of water today. I had thought I had thought nothing of it, you know, but Those were the kind of things that we did for each other all the way home.
None of us would have made it without each other. And I'm sure of that about my ancestors. That was the thing that I really think we learned.
If we got hurt, we didn't have anybody there to doctor us up. We basically bandaged ourselves up and we kept going because we didn't have an option to come home if we got hurt. I mean, there was a girl there, she tore her ACL and she rode back. Will Chavez, he had a bad bike wreck.
It was a back road, and so it hadn't been on our planned route, so we came up on a hill. I think we were the second group. My group was the second one to go down this hill, and it curved to the right at the bottom. And Taylor Olson and his group had already gone down, and they were wiped out at the bottom of that hill. And they were waving their hands, trying to get us to slow down.
And all of a sudden I heard this crash.
And I went over my handlebars, landed on my head, slid on my back for about 30 feet because that hill was really steep. And then Mike, he was riding with us that day, and trying to avoid me, he went into a really deep ditch with rocks and broke his collarbone. You know, back then there's no GPS or anything. The ambulance took a while to find us out there. The medics at the hospital trying to get the asphalt out of my arms.
My parents were out riding along and helping us, and my mother would doctor Will's wounds every day, change the dressings, and, you know, make sure that he had good, clean bandages on.
We managed to piece a bike back together for me to ride into Stillwell, so that was good.
It made me more aware of my responsibilities, as well as getting ready for the next step in our life, going to college, going into whatever field we were going to go to.
Made me more confident.
Mike wanted to bring attention to the trails not being marked. And so we advocated for that while we were out there to mark these trails. There were hardly any markers. There were state markers, but not national markers. And so 3 years after the ride, Congress allocated funding to start marking the trails, Cherokee trails. I don't know if we had anything to do with that, but I'd like to think we had a part in that.
The importance of remembering, the removal of remembering where you came from is not so that you can be upset and angry about this terrible tragedy that happened to your people, but so that you can look at it and say, you know, that was awful, but we're still here. We didn't just survive. I mean, we are thriving, and the ride made such a difference in all of our lives. It's just, once you do something like that, you think, well, if I can do that, I can do anything.
The Cherokee Nation has come a long way. We're still a strong people, and I'm proud to be Cherokee.